Ethan Parker woke early each morning to the scent of motor oil that permeated the air of his modest one-bay garage. It was a converted greenhouse behind his grandparents' old farmhouse, nestled at the edge of a small, close-knit town that prided itself on history and tradition. The wooden walls were permanently stained with the dark color of grease, and every stray bolt, wrench, and gear in that place felt like an extension of Ethan's own body. He had grown up knowing that someday he would make a name for himself as a mechanic. He just didn't know how extraordinary his path would become. One bright summer afternoon, while rummaging through the scattered remains of old vehicle parts, Ethan uncovered a forgotten relic. Hidden under a dusty drop cloth in the corner farthest from the doorway, he found the iron frame of a vintage coupe. The lines of its once elegant body had dulled under decades of neglect, but the silhouette of the car was unmistakably from the 1930. Rust had seeped into every crevice, eating away at what had once been a gleaming antique. The wheels were missing, the hood latch bent, and the interior ravaged by time. But even in its state of ruin, Ethan sensed potential. Something about that battered old shell spoke to him, reminding him of the stories he had heard from his grandfather about fairs, dances, Sunday drives, and countless nights beneath starry skies. As soon as he laid eyes on it, Ethan knew that this was no ordinary project. He realized that restoring such a car would require more than mechanical skill. It demanded delicate craftsmanship, research, and a personal touch. That same day, after staring at the chassis for a long while, he called his mentor, Russ Turner, a well-known restorer who had guided him through smaller projects when he first started tinkering with engines. Russ, an elderly man with a voice like gravel and a heart of gold, was nearly speechless when Ethan described what he had found. "That's a '34 Monarch sedan," Russ said over the crackling phone line. "I've only known a few to still be kicking around." "That's a beauty, if you can bring it back." Ethan, ever the optimist, let out a quiet laugh. "I'm definitely going to try, Russ. If anyone's got a chance at giving it a second life, I'd like to think it's me." The next day, Russ drove over from the next county to see it with his own eyes. Standing in the garage, arms crossed and eyebrows furrowed, he circled the car 3 times in silence. Then he turned to Ethan, his weathered features relaxing into a grin. "It'll be quite a job, but you know what? This car has a spirit that's worth preserving." News of Ethan's discovery spread quickly around town. People started dropping by to catch a glimpse of the once mythical '34 Monarch. Men in their 70s and 80s came by telling Ethan how they remembered the exact model from their own youth, back when it was the pinnacle of style and speed. Women who remembered saving up for rides in such cars during big city visits recounted tales of Sunday outings with suitors. Even the local historical society took an interest, asking if Ethan might eventually donate the Monarch for special parades. When the annual Labor Day Restoration Contest was announced a few weeks later, Ethan took it as a sign. The contest was a long-standing local tradition that showcased everything from vintage cars to antique tractors, awarding ribbons to the individuals who best preserved the memory of the town's past. The competition usually drew a sizable crowd, including families and retirees who once worked on assembly lines, farm fields, and racing teams. Ethan knew entering the Monarch would bring excitement to the community, and it would challenge him to push his abilities to their limit. He set about contacting old suppliers, searching high and low for the correct replacement parts. Wheel rims from a warehouse in Michigan, old hinges from a collector in North Carolina, a refurbished speedometer from a forgotten store on the outskirts of Chicago. Each new discovery felt like a victory, fitting puzzle pieces into place. Yet progress was slow. The metal framework needed extensive repairs, the seats had to be reupholstered in a period-correct style, and the engine's block required rebuilding from scratch. Still, Ethan worked tirelessly. Most evenings found him standing beside the Monarch, black grease streaked across his forearms, a drop of sweat beading on his forehead. His hair glistened under the fluorescent bulbs, which illuminated his work even after the sun went down. The rhythmic tapping of his hammer, the shrill hiss of the welding torch, and the occasional stream of melodic big band tunes blasting from a dusty radio enveloped the garage. Each new day brought fresh challenges, and each new week saw tiny steps of progress that began to accumulate into something remarkable. Of all the folks who wandered into Ethan's garage, the elderly residents of Sunset Hills Nursing Home became the most frequent visitors. The home's activities coordinator, Miss Pearl, stopped by to ask if she could bring small groups to witness the restoration process. She believed it would help spark memories in the residents, many of whom had grown up in an era where lavish automobiles symbolized freedom and adventure. Eager for an opportunity to share his passion, Ethan agreed without hesitation. The first group arrived on a sunny Wednesday morning. 5 senior citizens, accompanied by Ms. Pearl, filed cautiously into the garage, their faces lit up as they laid eyes on the monarch. Despite the ongoing reconstruction, body panels missing, interior stripped down to the metal floor, they recognized the car's glimmer of hope. One gentleman, Mr. Caldwell, began recounting a tale of how he courted his late wife in a similar vehicle, driving over dusty rural roads to the only dance hall within 100 miles. A tear glistened at the corner of his eye as he recalled their first kiss, stolen in the front seat. A wave of excitement coursed through Ms. Pearl's group, prompting more recollections. A woman named Irene told of her father driving the family cross-country in a Monarch, squeezing the kids into the back seat among tins of baked goods and battered suitcases. Another older man, who had lost most of his memory to the fog of dementia, stared at the restored steering wheel that Ethan had just installed. He gently placed his trembling hand on the polished wood, and for a moment he seemed transported to another time. He closed his eyes and mumbled something about grandfather's orchard before a quiet calm settled over him. As word spread of how the old car evoked such powerful recollections, more visitors followed. Ethan found himself fielding requests from residents of the nursing home and beyond. Pleas for house visits poured in. My aunt can't move well. Could she come see the car if we get a ramp? My grandfather used to be a motor enthusiast. Seeing this restoration might bring him joy. Before long, the Monarch had inadvertently become the heart of a communal healing process, a catalyst for the revival of memories once thought long gone. Ethan, moved by these stories, began documenting them in a spiral notebook. After each visitor left, he would jot down the name, the memory, and the significance that the Monarch had for them. He had never fancied himself a writer, but something about preserving these pieces of history felt right. The car had transcended its role as a mere project for a contest. It had become a vessel of remembrance, bridging generations and uniting the past with the present. Over the next couple of months, Ethan's dedication to detail proved uncompromising. He painstakingly hand-sanded the rust, replaced rotted weather stripping, and rechromed the bumpers until they gleamed like mirrors. Every day, Miss Pearl's groups visited, the seniors clutching pastel blankets over their laps, waiting to see each new improvement. Their eyes widened with excitement when at last Ethan revealed the freshly painted exterior, a regal shade of midnight blue that sparkled under the sun. Patients with memory loss found unexpected clarity as they stood near the Monarch, some shedding tears of joy as they recognized the lines of the body or the gleam of the hood ornament. Old couples placed shaky hands over each other's shoulders while they reminisced about drives along the ocean road or waiting at the train station near a Monarch not unlike this one. The car's restoration had come to represent a second chance for the coupe, yes, but also for the people seeking to revisit a moment in time that had aligned their dreams and given shape to their youth. In between these emotional visits and his grueling labor, Ethan was constantly studying old manuals and calling Russ for advice. Understanding every screw and bolt of this particular model demanded an almost encyclopedic knowledge of antique vehicles. Russ's guidance proved invaluable, especially when it came to calibrating the engine's timing and selecting the appropriate materials for the interior lining. Week by week, the Monarch started looking more and more like its former self. Completed wheels, newly upholstered seats, meticulously polished metallic accents, everything seemed to fall into place. At last, just 2 weeks before the Labor Day restoration contest, Ethan managed to get the engine running. It coughed and sputtered at first, then roared with a vigor that belied its age. The day he fired the engine for the first time, a small crowd had gathered. Ms. Pearl and a dozen residents in wheelchairs and walkers lined the edges of the garage. Russ was standing proudly behind them, nodding slowly. When the rumble sparked to life, Ethan saw tears slipping discreetly down Russ's cheeks. The older man placed one weathered hand on Ethan's shoulder and whispered, "Well done, kid. You did it." The garage erupted in applause and cheers. Even those who couldn't stand or clap had bright smiles on their faces. The camaraderie and pride in that moment was palpable. Not just for Ethan, this was a victory for everyone who believed in preserving the old ways, the shared stories of simpler times, and the memories that might otherwise have been lost. The final week leading up to the contest was hectic, yet exhilarating. Ethan fussed over every detail, from double-checking the gear shift's smoothness to polishing the headlamps until they sparkled. He practiced driving the Monarch around the block, listening closely for any suspicious clanks or rattles that might signal hidden mechanical issues. Despite the pressure, he felt immensely at peace behind the wheel of that newly revived classic. More often than not, his short test drives attracted onlookers who waved from their porches and cheered him on. The entire town seemed to be rooting for him. When Labor Day arrived, Ethan rose before dawn, hardly able to contain his excitement. The annual restoration contest customarily took place on the town's main street, which was blocked off from traffic for the day. Vintage tractors, restored pickup trucks, a fire engine from the 1950S, and classic cars of all shapes and sizes lined the road. It was a festival of mechanical pride, with spectators dotting the sidewalks and exclaiming over details only a true enthusiast would appreciate. Ethan drove the Monarch carefully, feeling the hum of the engine in his chest. The morning sun glowed on its midnight blue finish, and the polished chrome reflected the lively banners overhead. He guided the car to the assigned spot, near the corner by the courthouse, and stepped out to submit his paperwork for the contest. Passers-by immediately crowded around the Monarch, pointing at the interior, the wheel spokes, the ornate hood ornament shaped like a swooping swallow. Comments of admiration poured in, and some passers-by recognized it as the Parker Monarch they had heard so much about in the local paper. Before long, the judges made their rounds. They included a pair of local artisans, the town mayor, and a professor of automotive history from a nearby college. Ethan stood by answering questions about how he had sourced original materials, how he had carefully researched the general mechanics of the 1930S Monarchs, and the incredible number of hours he had invested. With each response, the judges nodded approvingly, glancing between Ethan's expression of quiet pride and the gleaming vision before them. As the day passed, the contest built to its usual crescendo, culminating in the announcement of winners in various categories. The mayor took the makeshift stage first, awarding ribbons for restored farm equipment, awarding a local farmer for his beautifully polished 1940S combine. Next came the motorcycle category, then the classic trucks. Finally, the mayor reached the category for which Ethan had labored: antique automobiles older than 1950. Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. Miss Pearl and a group from Sunset Hills had arrived earlier, front and center in the crowd, some sitting in folding chairs, some clasping the arms of their walkers. Russ stood in the back, leaning against a lamppost to take the weight off his arthritic knees. The mayor opened the envelope, read the note, then lifted his eyes to address the gathered throng. "We are proud to announce first place in antique automobiles goes to Ethan Parker for his exquisite restoration of the 1934 Monarch sedan." A thunderous applause erupted. Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, and a broad grin stretched across his face. He stepped onto the stage, nearly dizzy with elation, shook hands with the mayor, and received a golden trophy adorned with an embossed model car. Cameras clicked, confetti scattered, and for that moment, Ethan felt the entire town's gaze upon him. But it wasn't until he stepped off the stage that he truly understood what his efforts meant. Miss Pearl led Mr. Caldwell forward, the man whose memory of courting his late wife in a similar monarch never failed to bring tears to his eyes. In a trembling voice, Mr. Caldwell offered a heartfelt thank you. "You gave me back a part of my life," he said, voice cracking, "that I thought I'd never see again." Irene, who had ridden across the country in a Monarch as a child, pressed a small embroidered handkerchief into Ethan's hand. Thank you for all of this, she whispered. My mother stitched that for me years ago for our road trips. I want you to have it, so you'll remember you've been carrying all our memories in that car. One by one, the seniors offered words of gratitude, blessings for his future, tokens of appreciation, and at times they simply held his hand in silent thanks. The warmth and love emanating from these individuals cloaked Ethan in a sense of belonging he had never felt before. After the contest's awards had concluded, Ethan invited the seniors for one more ride, carefully helping them climb into the Monarch's newly upholstered seats. They ventured slowly down the main street, the crowd parting to let the unhurried procession through. The windows rolled down, allowing the gentle breeze to blow inside. Families lining the sidewalk clapped and waved, cheering the small group as if they were dignitaries in a parade. Within the car, Mr. Caldwell hummed a tune from the 1930s, and Irene pointed out a building that had been there back in her day. Another resident, though mostly nonverbal, beamed the entire ride, contentment written in every line of her face. The journey concluded back where it started, in front of the courthouse. Ethan switched off the engine slowly, turning around to see the bright spark in everyone's eyes. He felt as though he'd given them not merely a ride in an old car, but a portal to the times they treasured. This was bigger than any trophy or ribbon. This was grace. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan found that his triumph at the contest was just the beginning of something even more meaningful. Autumn arrived, painting the leaves vibrant shades of red and gold, and the crisp air carried a fresh sense of purpose. Ms. Pearl arranged weekly rides for small groups from the nursing home, calling these outings Memory Mondays. Each ride concluded with a stop at the ice cream parlor if the weather allowed. For many, these gentle excursions rekindled an energy in their spirits not seen in months or even years. The staff at Sunset Hills commented that the residents who had struggled with depression or dementia showed renewed engagement after these car rides. Local schools got wind of the project as well, and teachers began asking if Ethan would bring the Monarch for show and tell. The children marveled at the unusual design, the heavy doors, and the trunk that actually resembled a separate traveling chest. It was a lesson in living history that brought new respect for a time before modern technology took over. Ethan patiently explained the significance of manual transmissions and the value of craftsmanship that spanned generations. He also noticed that restoring the Monarch had transformed him personally. He had always been driven, but in a relatively isolated way, buried in engine parts and muffled by the hum of machinery. Now the car had become a bridge, connecting him to neighbors, elders, and even a younger generation hungry to learn. It reminded him of being a little boy, sitting beside his grandfather, listening with wide eyes to tales of old highways and glimmering auto shows. A few months later, at the town's annual Thanksgiving celebration, Ethan pulled up in the Monarch to deliver pies his mother had baked for a charity auction. Standing behind the open trunk, he carefully lifted out the dessert boxes, reminiscing about how far he and this car had come. Mr. Caldwell and Irene spotted him from across the park and hurried over to help. They spoke about how they had found renewed purpose in sharing their stories. Irene joked that if the Monarch kept traveling around town, soon everyone would have their memory restored. That day, after the auction, the three of them sat on a picnic bench with slices of pumpkin pie balanced on their laps. Mr. Caldwell pointed to a cluster of trees and mused that he remembered when they were no taller than saplings. Irene teased that she'd come back to the next year's fair wearing a flapper dress that might match the Monarch. They all laughed. The love and unity among them made the crisp air feel strangely warm. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan reflected on how a single discovery in his old garage had sparked a chain of events that wove him into the beating heart of his community. Sure, he'd won a trophy, but more importantly, he'd given many people the chance to see themselves reflected in the glossy midnight blue paint and pristine metal of a car that once symbolized hopes for the future. In that sense, the restoration had truly brought the past to life, stitching eras together with the thread of memory. Ethan tucked the spiral notebook of stories under his arm. He had continued to fill its pages with accounts of love, loss, adventure, and triumph from everyone who rode in that Monarch. He sometimes thought of turning those anecdotes into a formal collection for the local library or historical society. Even if he never published them, he felt a profound responsibility to carry on preserving them, the way he had preserved the very vehicle that inspired them. That night, the farmhouse was illuminated by a golden glow from a single lamp above the garage door. The Monarch's engine was still warm from the day's drive. Pulling a canvas cover over the car with gentle hands, Ethan paused to admire its graceful fenders and elegant hood. He thought about the future, about the journeys yet to be taken, about the new memories that would fuse the old with the new, and he felt unshakable gratitude for the bond that had formed between him and an entire generation who had so much to teach him. In the soft hush of the evening, Ethan whispered goodnight to the car, as if it were a friend. The Monarch, silent and enduring, carried the whispers of countless stories in its polished metal and comfortable seats. Even at rest, it remained an active bridge to the heart of the town's past. Above him, the stars glowed in a velvety sky, the same kind of sky people had gazed upon decades earlier when the Monarch was young and brimming with promise. Now, restored and cherished, the car held those promises still, waiting for the next sunrise to take it, and all who remembered, another step forward into new chapters of life.